Welcome. I'm here to talk about FAST's new consent project. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Dave Pyke. Amongst my responsibilities are such diverse elements as the FAST FHIR at Scale Taskforce Technical Director. I do other things in my spare time. Some of you may know me from other projects. Please don't yell at me. It's not my fault. I want to talk to you today about our latest project. We have started off. We did a work over the last year, but first, of course, have to do the antitrust statement. This is under the auspices of HL7, and of course with HL7 we do have antitrust requirements. If you ask questions or talk up, please don't say anything that qualifies as antitrust. That'll get us all in trouble and the world will end. So, probably should tell you who FAST is because you've all been listening to me this far and haven't thrown anything, so I'll start boring you. FAST is the FHIR at Scale Taskforce. It started off in 2017 as a payer provider group under the auspices of the Office of the National Coordinator for Healthcare Information Technology, which is just generally known as ONC. Purely based on payer provider collaboration, because at the time that seemed to be the biggest need. Over time, and that took less than a year, it became FAST. And yes, that is the first time ONC came up with an acronym that was good. Some of their acronyms. We spent about 3.5 years working on trying to work out the barriers that were stopping FHIR from being accepted at scale. Right? It's easy to do point-to-point. FHIR does that, right? You want to talk to your neighbor, you want to talk to somebody, across the state. That's great, but we want everybody to talk to everybody, preferably using FHIR. So renamed us to the FHIR at Scale Taskforce, and that was purely to understand the ecosystem barriers and everything that stopped it from happening and propose solutions to create interoperability at scale with FHIR. In late 2021, we started working, or early 2021, we started working on implementation guides. We started with the security, identity. We had hybrid intermediary exchange, all of these things. But about midway through, ONC got tired of our crap and kicked us out. Okay, that's oversaying it. ONC spun us off as a FHIR accelerator because it made most sense to get community and move it outside what ONC could do themselves to bring in the standards world as HL7 FHIR accelerator. We haven't changed. Our mandate is still the same. We're here to find ways to make FHIR work at scale, to stop all those little niggly things that stop FHIR from working when you want to do it with more than one person. And we're going to keep doing that. And this is the way we're doing it now. You've all seen the FAST security. You've heard about it. If you're working with TEFCA, many people call it UDAP. That's where it originated, but it is not UDAP itself. We have the digital identity and patient matching. We have quite a number of different things. But what we really want to do is, as I said, we want to take that one-to-one relationship that requires so much manual or other intervention and turn it into something that makes data flow. We want to automate as much as possible. We want to make it go cross-organization. We have that in so many, right? You have with X12, you have WEDI, you have all kinds of things that can do that for very specific use cases. We need that for FHIR. These are our members. As you can see, we have some really wonderful groups who've joined us, who've helped us out. You want to be among them. Your organization wants to be among them. Join us. You will be one with the FAST. So, as I said, a lot of different capabilities. Identity, that's digital identity and patient matching, our FHIR IG quest to create an identity that works cross organizations so that you're not sitting there going, I only work with this organization and I have to create a new identity each time. That makes everything break. We have the National Directory. We are working toward creating not only with a CMS, a national directory, but a way to exchange with it so that we can create a way that we have a directory of FHIR endpoints and other information relevant to FHIR that works on a national scale. Security, well, I've talked about that. That's the FAST Security IG, developed starting with UDAP and running it through the standards process. That is a way to make registration, authentication, authorization to a server happen all automatically without human intervention because humans slow things down in a wonderful way. We're working on other things. We have worked on the hybrid intermediary exchange. That's being put on hold till we get a new use case and just try to work it forward. But today, it's about consent. So, what is the need, right? Right now, consent is a very specific one-to-one relationship. It allows patients to opt in or opt out of rules and allows their personal representatives to do it. And we have all kinds of regulations saying, hey, we need to deal with consent. We need consent to share information for all kinds of things. But again, everything we do has been a one-to-one relationship, right? You go to your provider, you go to a hospital, you go wherever, you go to your payer and say, I consent for you to share this information with these people. That's great. You have control of that information, which is vital for making sure that patients are in charge of their health care. But there are thousands of places, and there are myriad organizations who would need access to your information. And it's not possible for you to walk into an emergency room if you're unconscious and say, yes, I want to share my information from this organization, when it's a brand new place, because you're in a place you haven't been before. There needs to be a way to federate that out, to get that information in, to make sure that anytime it's updated, revoked, or any other changes happen, that it can be available to whoever needs it. And it needs to be tracked through that, so that if your consent is shared across information, not the information itself, but the consent, that those updates and revocations can follow it. So, what's the barrier? Very straightforward. Consent is held in one repository for one provider. We're getting into network exchange. There's this thing called TEFCA, some of you may have heard about, which is designed to hook every organization that has to deal with healthcare information together. Can you imagine how many organizations need to get to know about your consent? Yes, you can share this, or more importantly, no, you can't. Right? I don't want my information from this organization shared because that organization has sensitive information. But I do want to make sure that this information is shared, so when I go to a new practitioner, whether it's because you've changed networks, or you've had an accident, or whatever, they can get a hold of information in the way you want them to get it, without having to break glass. Now, in most cases, treatment doesn't, bypasses all that thing, in most cases. But if you have 42 CFR information, or any substance use information that you don't want shared, those blocks need to be in place. And while we don't want to make everybody aware that, yes, I've had a substance use disorder, I'm not talking to me specifically. I've never done that kind of thing. The solution is to develop an IG, working with some of the best minds we can find, best minds in the industry on consent and how to network that. We're putting together a FHIR IG to not only work through how we get that information into a system, but how we propagate it out to a federated system, and how we trace it through that, so that updates, revocations, changes, whatever it is, follow through the system. So at any time, we can make sure that your consent is out there. It would be nice if we could have a central repository for the entire country that had consent. Could you imagine the size of that system and trying to organize it, regulate it, and create it? It's not going to happen. It would be nice, but it's not going to happen. So we need to deal with the fact that we have a federated system. Let's work out how to do that. What's in scope? Simple. Tracking of consent for new, updated, revoked patient member or member requests. Right? Exchanging between multiple repositories to make sure that information gets to where it needs to go and is traced through the system so it can be traced back. What's out of scope? The ceremony. How you get your consent recorded, not our problem. Right? If you go into the provider, they hand you a paper form and then type it in later, or they give you a laptop and say, just press this button, or whatever it is, we're not worried about that. How it's consented is not our problem. We just want to know how to get it where it needs to go. Okay, technical scope, consent management, consent decision enforcement. We are excluding specifically authorization, so consents that would be passed through an OAuth flow, that kind of thing. That's not within our realm. And broad the scope of authorization beyond consent enforcement. So again, we're not going to go outside the consent window. You can see on this diagram the area that we've created, the green section. So you can see that information going in, how it is managed, consent decision service, consent records, those kind of things, that's all we're looking at. Everything that's not in green, not our problem. Why? Because it's huge, and we need to focus on at scale. All right, a few of the use cases we're looking at: provider-initiated requested consent, patient-initiated consent, so how it's initiated, how it gets in there. Review, file sign, delegations, all of this information needs to be propagated out, right? Because it's all about information sharing, and that's specific. We're not doing treatment consent, we're not doing advanced directives, we're looking specifically at information sharing. Revocation and propagation of that. Disclosure audits, because of course, once you've federated it out, you need to be able to know who's seen it, right? This information has to come back. We'll have to figure that one out. Query consent, enforce consent decisions, those kind of things, how we deal with that. And there's a lovely little flow on the bottom that shows that, 1, 2, 3 consent stores. Three is a small number. I mean, if you think about just how many is in your city, in your state, in your region, that we need to, deal with. This is not a small task. Current status of the report. Well, we have 5, count them, 5 experts in the field. We have Derwin Day from HCSC, Kevin Day from EdFX, he just came back. We missed him. He's now back with us. Medul Islam from Optum, our hero Sam Schiffman from Availity, and Jean Duteau, who's not in the room, who is our technical IG lead. And, he's been left off this. I will have to get him. And Mohammed Jafari, the lone Canadian on the group, besides me, who is also added in. I'm going to have to add to this slide. We are still looking for one more person that is a consumer stakeholder, somebody who can go in and say, hey, these are the use cases and these are the conditions you haven't thought about, because we're all technical people. We're not consumers looking at it from that point of view. If you are, or someone who fits that role, please, fast@hl7.org is the way to get a hold of us. We would love to bring them in and get them involved. Monthly meetings, Fridays at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Yes, Friday afternoons are not the best time to have a meeting, but that's what we got. Please join us. We would love to hear your point of view as well. And of course, engaging with us, well, lots of ways to join FAST. It's not just consent. I know that's what I've been talking about, but again, all of our projects, so FAST security, directory, identity, and of course now consent, all need you. These are all available on the HL7 Confluence site under FAST, and you can see which projects you're interested in and which you'd like to add your voice to. We really want your voice. We also have Zulip streams if you just want to come in that way. They're not terribly active, but we do have them, and again, come talk to us. Should also mention, we now have implementer support hours. It's written really small on the screen because for some reason this slide is bigger than the screen. Our first Tuesday of each month from 1 to 2 p.m., we get some of our enlightened experts in the room. If you are implementing any of the FAST IGs and would like information, please show up. We're here to answer questions. We're here to give instruction. We're here to give you whatever you need to make your implementation easier, smarter, and of course, faster. So, if you want to learn more, the big thing is fast@hl7.org. That is our email address. That will go to our PMO. If you have questions, they'll get routed to the right people. If you have answers, they'll get routed to the right people. If you have opinions, those will get routed to the right people. If you have abuse, those will be routed to me. I'm used to it. But again, we have the FAST project page in Confluence. We also have a listserv, of course, part of the HL7 listserv system. We also have a LinkedIn group, which is fairly active. If you are on LinkedIn, and pretty much everybody is, you can find the FHIR Scale Taskforce group, join it, and join the conversation. And I think that's my last slide. It says questions.
Thanks for the overview. Maybe this is getting into the weeds a little bit, and I realize this is early, but you had a slide near the beginning that mentioned the opt-out requirement for the new provider access API.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really interesting use case because it's opt-in by default. So has the group started to think about how we're going to record? It's not really revocation, it's because I'm not revoking something that I've given.
Yeah,
right? So
you're creating negative consent.
yeah, like I have to record exactly.
Yeah.
So has the group considered this at all yet? Again, I realize it's early.
Consent, positive or negative, is something that's inherent to consent altogether. Whether you're opting in and saying, yes, I want to share this, or opting out saying, no, I don't, that's part of it. So yes, in that it's just part of consent. There is no special necessary for saying, hey, I don't want to be part of this. It's just, we said yes or no, that's just part of the basic consent, so it's part of the basic use case, yeah.
In the use cases that you mentioned, do you need to track the source of truth, for the patient, like when he initiated the consent and who has the copy of the truth and things like that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right. I mean, we need to know where it came from so you can track it through and make it all the way back.
Hey, Dave, thanks for presenting on this. Just like looking at the current IG and the presentation, it seems like this is really potentially like really big scope and like a significant step forward from kind of current state of the art in US interoperability networks.
Yeah.
I assume that's on purpose. And could you explain a little bit more about like what you expect, like the ultimate kind of national architecture would be if this project is incredibly wildly successful? Like, are there consent management systems that adhere to the forthcoming implementation guide for for each QHIN, for each vendor, for each hospital, for each payer? Yeah. Is the CMS running one? That kind of thing.
To be honest, I don't have an answer for you. We are very early in the process and haven't actually started writing IG beyond very simple use case descriptions. What that looks like, in my mind, is that your consent is where you need it to be. Whether CMS runs one or not, whether ONC runs one, who runs one, we don't know. But the goal is to make sure that if you go into a provider and information needs to be shared with that provider, your consent is already available and in the decision support process.
Hi, Mark Scrimshire. Dave, we should sync up because to your first question, the latest CI build of Payer Data Exchange have actually defined a consent profile for that opt-out for Provider Access API, okay, which we're also dealing with Provider Access API in that same IG. So I'd love to sort of sync up with you on that.
Okay. We've been using the IHE consent profile, Privacy on FHIR, I think it's called, as our basis. So we'll probably need to get yours and make sure that we can handle that use case.
It'd be good to sync up to say that the first draft of that consent has gone into the IG.
Okay.
Because we're trying to get this developed.
Okay, great, thank you.
Just out of curiosity, I'm asking this. Is it at some point SCIM will be supported, or will it be left to the system for cross-identity management? Will that be left to the implementers?
Identity management is specifically out of scope. So I guess is the only cheating answer I have. How that's going to be handled, how all of that needs to be out of scope, we need to focus on just consent and federation of it. So how identity will be managed. FAST has a wonderful identity FHIR IG. Maybe we could leverage that. Or, again, we don't have any plans on looking at that specifically.
I hear there are giant improvements in consent R5 over the R4. Are you planning to, what version are you planning to build on? Or are you going to look at maybe some of the backports of the improvements in the R5 resource?
Well, right now, the legislated requirements is FHIR R4. So I thank you for saying that the FHIR consent has improved. It's so rare that I get those kind of compliments. FHIR consent is my baby. How that's going to work, I'm going to leave that to the co-chairs. Sam, have you given any thought to backporting any of the capabilities? Or are we just going to worry about IHE?
I think we're still at the point of so as a group, we've gotten to the point where we have a scope to talk about, and now we need to get to those use cases and then start to talk about particulars like which consent would work in the use cases that we want to talk about. But I do think there's some really interesting possibilities there, and appreciated the talk earlier that I attended on R4 versus R5 consent that you gave.
There was a talk on R4 versus R5 consent? Oh, man, I miss everything.
This is the last question.
In Michigan and New Jersey, we do have a statewide consent. It's not on FHIR, but it's all JSON-based. So if
Yep.
anyone wants to see a demo of that in the workflow, let me know.
All right, great.
Well, thanks, David.
Thank you.
Great talk.